Alrighty. It looks like we are live. Here we are. Let me just make
Yay.
sure.
Okay.
Yes. Alrighty. 1 second. Ah. mm,
Oh yeah, it's live. I can see it on my page as well.
Woohoo! Nice. Alrighty. Yes, we are. Yes, I can see it too now. Alrighty. So, welcome. We are here at another heart-to-heart conversation. Today's topic is on anxiety and uncertainty while going back, preparing, and transitioning. Hey! Back to daily life. I want to introduce Crystal Martinez Acosta. She's a licensed professional counselor supervisor and a nationally certified counselor. And she works here at Counseling El Paso, and she's also going to be part of the heart to heart conversation. Um,
Hello, everybody.
and my name is Jasmine, Jasmine Silva, and I'm a licensed professional counselor here at Counseling of El Paso as well. Uh, so we're gonna, as people are signing in and logging in into the Facebook Live, uh, we're going to take some time to talk about different concepts. At the end, we're also going to give some tips and suggestions to help reduce any feelings or symptoms of anxiety. And then also, we'll share a resource at the end as well. And then we will have an opportunity for questions or comments at the end of the presentation as well. So we want to thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you opening your heart for us to be able to share this support and resources to the community as well. So so I also wanted to make I guess like a little bit of comment. Like we realize that for every member, for every individual, the transitioning back might look very different for everyone. So we don't want to make an assumption that everyone's going back, or make a posture or for whatever situation. We realize that everyone is transitioning differently. Perhaps the workplace is opening up, or maybe the businesses are opening up, and we realize that it might look different for everyone, right? So this is basically a conversation for individuals who are transitioning, but also who are staying home. There are individuals also who will have the opportunity to be able to work from home. So we want to, and we realize that there's also anxiety and uncertainty regarding for how long this will happen. And there's a lot of what ifs and how comes that might come up for everyone, whether you're going back or transitioning or not. So we just want to be mindful of that, realizing that everyone's in a very different place. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. So I think with the transitioning to work after a pandemic or during a pandemic, because this is still going on, we haven't
Yeah.
had any really effective cures or treatments that have been announced or available. And so there's still a lot of uncertainty because there's this kind of like push and pull of how we can continue to go back to our normal lives, and continue to either work or go to school or send the kids to school, go to and send them to daycare or do whatever it is that we are used to doing. So this has definitely been a huge disruption, or a pushing of the brakes, if you will, on our daily lives and the way that we used to live. So there are feelings of anxiety now going back from, taking our foot off the pedal, off the brakes. And so, like Jasmine said, some people are going back, some people are not going back to work. And maybe some people are doing kind of like a hybrid approach where they're like working from home and working at the office or doing a little bit of both. And so, either way, there's still an invisible threat out there, which is the coronavirus. And so, understanding that that invisible threat is still there is going to cause some anxiety. So, I think we should start by defining anxiety a little bit more and understanding the differences between types of anxiety. So, as therapists, we understand, Jasmine and I understand that this world, or this is our world, right? Like, we're therapists through and through, and this is what we do every day. And so sometimes when we say anxiety, we understand what each other are talking about. But when we talk to other people in the community or people who don't quite understand mental illness or disorders, anxiety can mean something very different. And it can even have like a negative
Mhm.
sounding connotation to it, or
That's right.
something like that. So we just want to clarify what we mean by anxiety. So, anxiety, it can be helpful and it can be hurtful. And the way that I like to explain it to clients is that it's kind of like a superpower. Any feeling that we have, whether it's anger, sadness, or anxiety or nervousness, um, can really be a helpful thing and it can be an unhelpful thing. And there's no such thing as a bad emotion. So a lot of times anxiety comes across as like a bad thing to
Mhm.
experience, right? But the way I like to explain it to people is that anxiety can be unpleasant or it can be pleasant or
Pleasant.
helpful, right? And so in some cases anxiety can be helpful. And one of those examples would be something like feeling excited because you're going to go through a really important or big life event, or um getting on a roller coaster. That's something that we had talked about yesterday, right,
Yeah.
Jasmine? Like feeling anxious and excitement.
Looking
Um,
forward to it, in fact, some
mhm.
cases, right?
Exactly. So that can be a good nervousness and then a good anxiety. And functional anxiety can also lead us to do things that need to get done. So, for example, if we have good anxiety or good stress or pleasant stress, then we know that we have to go into the kitchen and wash dishes or write our assignment or essay for school. And those kinds of anxieties can kind of like light a fire under us to get things done.
Mhm.
And then there's kind of like dysfunctional anxiety or unhelpful anxiety, which would be that kind of like debilitating anxiety that really gets us to be in that like fight, flight, or freeze in like a negative way. So, for example, like back in caveman days, I don't know if there were saber-toothed tigers around or something like that, but let's just pretend.
We'll pretend.
We'll pretend that there were saber-toothed tigers around the same time humans were around. And anxiety was our brain's way of protecting us, right? So, like, we would perceive a threat in the environment and we would fight it, flight, which is like run away, or freeze to survive. And so, when anxiety gets the best of us, now we are no longer in caveman times and we might not necessarily see a saber-toothed tiger, but if we're perceiving a threat in the environment like the coronavirus, even though it's invisible, we know that it's there, it can really debilitate us. And so, some of the symptoms or signs of like debilitating anxiety could be like, um, oh,
Restlessness.
right, restlessness, avoidance, not being able to get things done the way you're supposed to get things done.
Mhm. Trouble
Yeah.
concentrating.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what the little signal is in front of your brain, but I was like, it has to do with something. Yeah. So not being able to concentrate.
Maybe stomach issues, heart issues like palpitations, right?
Right. So that's what we call like somatic symptoms, which means in the body.
Mhm.
Soma is for body, and so anything that has to do with that. So there's that difference, right, between helpful or hurtful anxiety. Um,
Right.
and so, yeah, I think that it was important that we need to talk about the types of anxiety that we feel and kind of like why we get anxious.
Right, right, most definitely. And I think that to to go like into the other term that we were going to explain and talk about is the uncertainty. So we are far more likely to feel anxious, to feel restless, to feel like a sense of powerlessness or helplessness whenever we come across uncertainty. Uncertainty can be something that, like Crystal is mentioning, that we can enjoy. So, for example, that's the sometimes you'll hear comments like, I like spontaneity and I like having like a say and trying new things. That to that degree, it's actually enjoyable. We do enjoy. We don't like things to be like a daily, like two things to be too much of a routine. But when we have high amounts of uncertainty, that means that we feel like we have very little or limited locus of control, meaning our ability to impact, change, or make decisions, we feel it's very limited. So that's where the word powerlessness comes from too. So basically, there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of confusion, and a lot of things are not certain. And a lot of the times, what happens with uncertainty, I like to reference also Brene Brown's research on vulnerability, is that what happens is that the way she defines vulnerability is that there is emotional exposure, there's no certainty, which is what we're addressing, and then also there are risks involved. So that's something that we are also experiencing when we experience uncertainty. It's a sense of vulnerability, and I know that you have also um, more to elaborate on that, right? As we were preparing yesterday, Crystal, on vulnerability and how it can have two places, right? For us in relationships. Mhm. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So I think just kind of like from my lens, I specialize and have a lot of experience in working with people who've experienced trauma. And something that comes across my mind whenever we talk about vulnerability is that trauma really happens when there's vulnerability, but connection also happens when there's vulnerability. And so that just crossed my mind, and it made me think of how these are vulnerable times for people, and so we're really either open to like getting traumatized, or we're really open to connection if we allow ourselves to and we put our defenses down. And so one of the antidotes, or one of the things that helps anxiety, is feeling connected to people and feeling
Mhm.
a strong connection to either like a caregiver, or and this is, I'm talking about children, right? Like
Yeah.
caregiver attachment, and that connection can really mitigate or interfere or be helpful when it comes to preventing anxiety or other even traumas in life. And so uncertainty and unpredictability um, are generally unpleasant things,
Yeah.
and can leave us open to being vulnerable. And this whole coronavirus thing is really causing a lot of unpredictability, and kind of like the future of what this means for people.
Mhm.
Like where the rubber hits the road for a lot of people is, what are we going to do with our kids when they go back to school? What are we going to do with our jobs? Do we have to go back to be in person? What if I work around a bunch of other people? Or how are we going to maintain 6 feet apart? And so there's all these like what ifs, and what are we going to do?
Mhm.
And your mind really can get consumed with what the plans are going to be. And it's really, really hard to plan and be prepared on two levels. One, when there's a lot of uncertainty, how are we going to plan? For example, if I was going to plan a vacation in October, November, December, um, how is that going to work logistically in the middle of a pandemic, right? That might
Mhm.
those plans are going to look very different. We might not even be able to travel. I can choose to travel if I want to, but then there's a level of risk, right? But then also, when we look at the brain under stress, the brain under anxiety, and the traumatized brain, we're not really able to access the frontal lobe, which has to do a lot with planning, talking things out, processing, communicating. And so on that level as well, it's really difficult to plan. So there are two things I think at play when we talk about planning for the future here. So it's like the coronavirus, but then your brain under stress and anxiety. So what I want to say about that is that it's completely normal and okay for us to feel this collective level of anxiety and uncertainty about the unpredictability of the coronavirus and the effects that it's going to have on our society and our workplaces and things like that. So, um, it's okay to have that level of uncertainty. And we just have to
Yes.
find small ways, which we'll get into a little bit later, small ways to find that level of control, the things that we can control, even if it's on a very small and arm's reach level. Those are the kinds of things that are going to help us manage anxiety in the future together as a society and as individuals.
Right. I agree with you. And one of the things that came up as you were sharing also about like the uncertainty and what it might look like planning in the future is about also like when we can name it, we can tame it, and then we can change it. And one of the things that I wanted to I guess call it is that sometimes we can have flash forwards. So flash forwards is not I did not invent this concept or this idea. It was from I learned it from Dr. Ignacio Harero. And one of the things that he explains sometimes, and this is common that we can experience as a society. So there's flashbacks, things that we remember from the past, but then there's flash forwards, things where our mind can go in the future. And typically sometimes what can happen is we can experience like worst case scenarios. So that's what it's called. If you're experiencing that, I just want to share with us and the community that that's something that the brain does sometimes. If I go there, if I go towards the future, and if I think of the worst case scenario, then I will, like Crystal said, it's going to flood us. It's going to maybe feel like a little bit too much because there's very little choices that or control that we might have. But the brain will do that sometimes to protect us. But sometimes if it's a little bit too active, it can actually cause symptoms for us. So I just wanted to share that that's something. If you are experiencing that, there are methods, there are ways to work through it, to think through it, to feel through it. And absolutely, there's always support as well if you're experiencing too many of those flash forwards or too many of those worst case scenarios, which can increase like also anxiety. So, and I guess the last thing I'll share on that, and the reason sometimes it does that, it's because it's a defense mechanism that we have. If we don't have enough information, the brain likes to fill in the gaps. So if we might make assumptions or we might think, and then we have an inclination sometimes to think the worst. But again, it's out of protection. It's from that mechanism. So I just wanted to highlight that point as well. Mhm.
Right. And I think this is kind of where we start crossing into anxiety disorder territory, is where we have either like too many of those flash forwards or flashbacks, or what we call like ruminating thoughts or intrusive thoughts, things that start to flood our brains, like you were saying, to the point where we're unable to function. So, where it's too much, it's like overload, overstimulating thoughts, to where it makes us freeze or fight or flight, right? And so I think these are important lines to kind of draw. And so, obviously, if you are feeling any of those symptoms or having any of these thoughts, then it's really important to seek support in some way, either
Mhm.
talking to another person, creating that awareness with other people, like, hey, I'm experiencing this. Could it be that I have like anxiety, or is this normal, or is this typical of me? You know me, and you know how I am, and do you think that I've been acting in a strange way or in a different way? And so that way I think it's easier for people to go out and get help, or reach out for support.
Right. And I think that as you share that, it comes to something comes to my mind also is that, you know, I there are experiences that we have where people can hurt us, but also people can help us heal as well. So, as you were sharing that, it one of the things that that is a benefit of reaching out to a friend, to a family, to a support system, is being able to say, like, "Are you experiencing this? I'm experiencing this," and it really is humanizing whenever we realize that the what we're experiencing is shared. And then also, that's also where we, like you said, like about the vulnerability, where we connect, but also where we experience compassion. So compassion is this deep understanding that what we are experiencing is a human experience, and that we're not alone, but we add a little bit of kindness and we add understanding to it.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
I agree.
So uh-huh. Cool. So I think we also wanted to talk about some 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 different experience, some different experiences that people might be having, or it might be common, and some of them might be like disbelief with everything going on. There might be some anger, or also like maybe aggression as well, towards others or even towards ourselves. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about those, because sometimes it could be the underlying root of it could be like anxiety or fear as well, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think as we were preparing for this talk yesterday, and we were talking about fear and anger and the relationship between the two, I was telling Jasmine that it's a little bit, this is going to sound like Yoda. And I'm pretty sure that there's a quote from Yoda in a movie, in a Star Wars movie, where he talks about like anger is fear or fear is anger or something like that. And I didn't look it up. But anyway, he's onto something there, because if we look at, you know, the neurobiology of emotions and the fight, flight, or freeze system, we also can identify that anger and fear kind of come from the same place and can feel the same physiologically, like in our bodies. So one of the examples that I was giving Jasmine yesterday was that let's say you're driving down the freeway and you're going, you know, 60, 65 down I-10, and you're on your way to an important appointment, and then somebody gets in front of you, cuts you off, and is only going maybe 50 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour. That can really make people upset. If you're driving, right, you can feel the effects of anger. But I think what really is happening there, if you dissect the situation a little bit more, is that that was really a dangerous thing for that person to do, right? And so really your reaction is coming from fear, is that, okay, this person cut me off and I could have crashed into them, and then we could have really gotten into a lot of um, trouble or harm, right? And so I think people react with anger in situations that really cause fear. And so something that we wanted to talk about a little bit more is like that connection between anger and fear, and how some people really display their fearfulness or anxiety through getting angry or aggression. And we just wanted to make sure that that was a point that people understood, that if you notice somebody becoming a little bit more irritable, people who are, let's say, not irritable, but even kind of like bullying or abusive towards another person, it could really be like a serious anxiety issue or something going on there, that needs to be explored further. And so that's also kind of a common symptom of an anxiety disorder, and also of depression too. And so a lot of times we think like, oh, an anxiety disorder is really only people who are scared or panicked, or depression is really something where people display a lot of sadness or low motivation. Well, no, it can also be
Mhm.
irritability and anger too. So there's a strong connection between those two emotions.
Right. And I think that that is something that one of the things that can happen for people is that there is also, so this is like another concept, like if you can name it, we can tame it, we continue to sort of like thinking, um, uh, chain of thought, is that if we are observing that, it can cause also a bystander effect for people who are witnessing that. So it might be like if we are witnessing like a protest gone in a different direction, maybe in a violent direction, or things that are occurring in the community where we sense the aggression or we can feel the irritability in people. It can really create a sense of helplessness for people who are on the bystander, like who are witnessing that. So that's also like a something that we had commented on a previous webinar on vicarious trauma and the effects that it can have on individuals as well. So I just wanted to highlight that even if you're not the one who is perhaps irritable or acting in an aggressive way or feeling angry, even being a bystander can have an impact. And I just want to normalize that, even if you feel like, well, I'm not the one doing it, but I just feel anxious whenever I see people arguing or people all of a sudden, maybe being more annoyed with things than usual. That's something that happens. We feel it's a bystander effect. It's like being on the sidelines and feeling like we don't have a lot of agency or control over those things as well. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think another example of kind of anxiety manifesting itself through anger might be like unjustifiable or irrational attacks on like people who are of Chinese descent or
Mhm.
have that ethnicity or appear to look as if they are Asian in some way. And we, as a society, have become like either fearful of them or, are engaging in these violent acts toward people just because of the way they look, because we know information has shown us that the coronavirus came from China. And so those are ways that fear can really get out of hand, and cross into that unjustifiable violent territory where it becomes like unhelpful anxiety and unhelpful anger, because there's also that too, right? There's
Mhm.
helpful anger and unhelpful anger, or what we
Yeah.
call righteous anger. And what
And
was the other one?
reckless anger.
Reckless anger or righteous anger. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that. You think you explained
Yes.
it a lot better.
Yes, and again, like I'm the type of person I will not take credit for concepts or ideas. So there's this neuropsychologist. His name is Dr. Mario Martinez, and he explains that there is righteous anger, and he actually explains that there's benefits to that anger. And I'm glad you brought this point because I don't want the community to feel like, oh, I shouldn't be angry. No, there is such a thing as a healthy anger. And what he found is that righteous anger is the one that comes up for us out of protection for somebody's innocence or even our own. It might even be our dignity. And it's out of a place of respect and humanizing people versus dehumanizing people. So the reckless kind, it's also, it comes from the same place typically. It's a place of protection, but it just doesn't have a channel. It doesn't have an avenue to be able to say, okay, I'm going to use this out of protection towards, somebody who might not be able to protect themselves or who has less power or less agency or less of an ability to advocate for themselves. So it can actually be very healthy. It's not a bad thing. The body, from his research, he has explained that actually it's very adaptive. It's a very adaptive form of anger. And so I just wanted to highlight that one. So yes, good point.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like anxiety, how there's helpful anxiety, unhelpful anxiety. There's also helpful anger and unhelpful anger. Remember that anger is not bad, anxiety is not bad. There are just different ways to experience those emotions, and some can be healthy or unhealthy or pleasant or unpleasant. So,
That's
yeah.
right. Yes. So one of the things that we wanted as we're talking about this, we realize that it might bring to light, maybe even as we're reflecting, even in ourselves. Yeah, I have been feeling this. We've been feeling this or that. So we want to make sure that we also provide like recommendations or suggestions or resources for you to be able to uh, to manage some of that anxiety, because it's something that's normal and we can all feel that. So one of the things that comes to mind is on mindfulness. So I'd invite Crystal to elaborate more on this. I know that the way you elaborated yesterday as we were preparing sounded like super nice. So
Let's see if I can duplicate that. I'm not sure. Um, so yeah, I think what we were talking about earlier, as far as like the uncertainty and really feeling like we can't control a lot of things, and we can't really plan too far ahead into the future because then our plans can change or completely be crushed. And so I think a more um, like a tangible and healthy approach would be able to have us plan and control whatever is in our reach, like
Mhm,
low hanging fruit, if you will. And one of the ways to arrive to that place is to be mindful. Mindfulness is not necessarily like relaxation exercises or something like that. I think there's a kind of a difference between the two. And so, practicing mindfulness is being able to be mindful. Like that's the core word in mindfulness, right? And so, really giving mind or attention to whatever is happening in this current moment.
mhm,
So, for example, for those of you who are watching right now, I don't know what's going on around you. I don't know where you're watching, but right now you're focusing on the screen and you're focusing on my voice. And that's in real time happening right now in this moment. And so you don't really have control over the future or what your neighbor's doing or what your husband or wife is doing or what your kids are doing. You're just focusing on what's happening
mhm,
right now in this moment. And it's really a grounding way to look at the world and to look at time and to perceive things. And so mindfulness is a really powerful antidote to anxiety. And so when I talk to my clients, you know, in the clinical world and professionally about managing their anxiety, a lot of times anxiety comes from worrying too much about the future, worrying too much about things you can't control. And so mindfulness, what that really does is that the concept really reins in all of those thoughts and feelings and just helps you focus on this one very single moment that you're alive right now, just
mhm.
right now in this very moment. And so I think um that's a powerful thing to focus on when you're feeling anxious. And one, just real quick, one mindfulness exercise that's really common that I feel like has been floating around the interwebs and social media lately is like the 5 4 3 2 1 exercise.
Mhm.
And so that's one example of how to practice mindfulness. And so maybe we can just do that really, really quickly with people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so if you're watching or listening to this, I'm going to guide you really quickly through this exercise for less than a couple of minutes. So if you can, remember the 5 4 3 2 1 exercise is a mindfulness exercise that helps you focus on your five senses. So it's watching with your eyes, hearing with your ears, smelling with your nose, tasting
Mhm.
with your mouth, and then feeling like with your skin or your senses, right? So um for right now, just really quickly, try to identify five things in your line of sight. But these five things have to be things that you wouldn't have noticed before. So you have to look a little bit harder. So, for example, if I look around where I'm at, I'll see like a small crack in this lamp that's in front of me that I've never noticed before. Maybe the color of the wall is a little bit different because of the shadows on the wall. So just looking at five different things that you can see or notice, and then four different things that you can listen to. So maybe there's cars passing by, maybe there's birds outside, maybe there's an airplane flying overhead, maybe you hear your kids in the next room, dogs barking, and then three things that you can feel. So feeling like the
The
chair under
chair.
your legs, feeling like your hair touching your neck, or feeling like your glasses on your face. So things that you haven't really noticed before that you really have to tune into the moment to absorb. And then also maybe two things you can smell. So hopefully those are pleasant. And sometimes you can actually grab something in your environment that you can smell. So like smelling
Uh-huh.
your hair,
Oh, it's
smelling
like
your laundry,
coffee.
smelling your coffee, smelling flowers that are nearby, or even just the air that's around you, smelling your breath. I don't know, anything that you want to smell. And then the last one thing that you want to do is taste. So if you have like a snack nearby, just being mindful of
Mhm.
what that tastes like or how it feels in your mouth. And so using your five senses in that exercise for like less than 5 minutes can really ground you and help you combat um, those racing thoughts and rumination and all those things that are happening in your brain. So that's an example of mindfulness.
Yes, and thank you so much for explaining that because I think that's a very like tangible, realistic, like very a doable exercise that we can do, and we don't have to tell anybody either. Like you could do it in your privacy, just in your mind as you're observing things. So that's also like a benefit to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing that sometimes I have found helpful that I share sometimes is like you can one thing that helps sometimes is like being able to recognize what is the most important thing to you right now. So, for example, sometimes it might be like the most important person to me right now is Crystal, or the most important thing right now is the community, right? So sometimes that could even be grounding. If we have all these to dos, all these other priorities, who or what is the most important thing to you right now, and notice that that can really shift that attention for us in that moment too. Yeah.
Right. And I think it leads us to our next point of like internal and external locus of control. Um, so that term comes from William Glasser and choice theory. And so I get excited about this topic. But anyway, I don't know if you want to explain internal and external locus of control, Jasmine.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and so basically it's kind of like the word sounds internal from the inside, our ability to control within us internally, and then external is extra, like outside of us. So it's our ability to know what is within us, what we have a say, what we have a choice over, decision making. And the external, sometimes Stephen Covey, I know in his work, he refers it as to the circle of concern. It's something that we cannot really have a lot of say over, but it's outside of us. And then with Stephen Covey's work, the internal, he calls it a circle of influence. So that's what we have influence over and control over. So
Right. Yeah, so I was just thinking like an example of that would be like the weather.
yes.
Like that's an external thing that we don't have control over, but what we do have control over is if we're going to wear a jacket or a tank top that day. And so that's something that is within our internal locus of control.
That's right. Sorry, I was just getting an image. One time it started raining and I had nothing, and all I had was like covering my books and everything. But anyways, so
You
go ahead.
controlled what you could. Yeah. Mhm.
So I know that you have a lot of information and knowledge regarding choice theory. So if you'd like to elaborate more on that, I'd invite you to do that. Mhm.
Yeah, I think the important part about this is understanding how that sense of having control or the loss of control can really lead to anxiety. And so, as we're talking about integrating back into society during a pandemic, there's going to be a lot of things that we can't control, but there are a lot of things that we can control. So, for example, we can't control if our coworker is going to cough or sneeze in our direction, but we can control if we're going to either distance ourselves from that person, wear a mask, or work from home. And so anxiety can really come from that sense of loss of control. And the antidote to that would be to try to take control of the things that you can. So, for example, doing small things that are within your reach. And part of this is really deciphering between good information, bad information, misinformation, and even the overflow and over kind of stimulating overwhelm of too much information. So, which can cause anxiety as well. So, if you have the news on 24/7 and you hear a recommendation from the CDC about wearing a mask, but then you see, I don't know, our president not wearing a mask, or you see certain leaders not social distancing, and it's like, what do I make of this information? What am I supposed to
Mhm.
do? So, what you do is you do what's best for you, and you take control of whatever information you have and do the best you can with what you have. And so, in no way, shape, or form is this like therapists are making a recommendation about masks or not. This is therapists making a recommendation to follow your internal locus of control and doing what's best for you and your family. And so, really, like you were saying earlier, Jasmine, really prioritizing what's what you're going to do, who's most important to you, what's most important to you, either like financially,
Mhm.
relationally, um, with your job, your career, your kids. And so, really setting those priorities and making decisions that are within your control and being able to decipher through that information as much as you can.
Right. And one of the things that comes to mind too, as you're sharing that, is the concept or the idea of personalizing your timeline. So one of the things that we realize is occurring is that we're going through phases. There is a like stages when it comes to the current pandemic, and now we are in the one where we're the guidelines of the state or the country, um it's to, I guess, like reopen and to start opening business, resuming certain services with certain guidelines, and to mitigate or reduce risks as much as possible. But with that said, you have a right, and we want to give you, remind you that you have permission to personalize or make your timeline, your own individual timeline for you, for yourself, and for your family as well. So when I'm referring to that, the examples that come to mind is, it might mean, okay, what, when, and how, what would it look like to go back to work, or when and how would it look like to resume, visiting friends, family members, maybe even starting when and how would it be okay for me to go visit a restaurant, or go back to the church, and or to the movie theater. Like, those are timelines that regardless of whatever externally is occurring, you have a choice to determine what feels right for you. Like Crystal was saying, we're not saying to do this or that, but to be able to really get in touch with your internal system and be able to say, this feels right, or I'm not ready yet. And that's okay. You have permission. And that's something that I always come back to. It's something that we cannot force. Like, it's a process that only you will know when it's time to. So that's something that it's a like an idea or a suggestion that might be helpful in personalizing your own timeline for stuff.
Right, right. Which can cause other people anxiety, right? Because if your timeline, say, for example, Jasmine, your timeline is like, I'm going to go to a movie theater, but we're coworkers and I have to be in the same office with you. It might be like, who did Jasmine come into contact with over
Mhm.
the weekend when she was at the movie theater? And now I have to sit next to her at work. So it can be nerve wracking. But then I implement my own timeline about what's best for me and my family. And then that will help reduce anxiety, because if I worry too much about what Jasmine's doing, then that's just going to cause me a whole world of,
Mhm.
yeah, anxiety provoking thoughts and things like that. So and that's what's called like external locus of control, feeling like all these things are happening around me and they're happening to me and I have no control. So whatever Jasmine's doing is controlling my life. And that's not an accurate way like to perceive things. And I think that that's where people's anxiety comes from. So that's just an example of how to continue applying like internal external locus of control, and really understanding that you do have some choice, even if it's very, very small choices. And we understand that there are a lot of people who are in like vulnerable populations, right? So, like the elderly, or people who are sick, or people who are frontline workers. Um, and
Children.
essential workers,
Mhm.
children, and we have to like live by these kind of external guidelines or whatever. But even within those external guidelines and influences, we do have some, even if it's a small amount of agency and self control and making those decisions for ourselves, even if it's very, very small. And those are the things that you want to focus on for sure.
And I want to highlight something too in that the more that we do that with little small decisions, we experience success. And the more we do that, our sense of like autonomy, our sense of own agency, ability to make decisions for ourselves, feeling like we have an impact and a say in our lives, will start increasing more and more and more and more. So that's actually something that is, it doesn't just apply for today, but it's something that can be transferred to other parts of our lives as well. So there's a benefit in practicing it even in this moment as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this really ties into the other thing that I know that you were going to talk about a little bit more, is like the expectations versus expectancy. And
That's right.
so I like, you will totally explain that because I like will butcher that. So go
No,
ahead.
no, no, no worries. I felt like that with mindfulness. I'm like, I know she had it really good. Okay, so this comes from Gary Landreth's work. So his modality when it comes to working with children is using child-centered play therapy, and one of the tenets or the ideas that he whenever he he's training, I guess it's in his book, or for new play therapist is to trust the process. And but one of the things that comes to mind is expectations versus expectancy. So whenever we have like expectations of things of how we want things to go about, there's a level of force, a level of frustration that occurs within us, and in some cases we want to rush things. So
Yeah,
what
like expectations bring pressure.
Yes, yes, a lot of pressure. And it's also, it could be a pressure that can really consume us, even us, like mentally, physically, emotionally. And the antidote, or like the other option, would be expectancy. So, what he explains is hope, having hope and the belief in the trust that whatever it is that we want or hoping for, that the time will come for it. And when we do, we go slow and gentle and we start discovering that. So he has a beautiful metaphor of a vase in a dark room. And when you know that there's a beautiful vase in a dark room, so that's our hope, or you know, how we want things to be, that when we enter the dark room, we don't go in there flopping our arms around and moving things. We actually go very slowly, gently. We know it's there and we don't want to toss it. We don't want it to break. So that's basically the metaphor. We know it's there, and the expectancy is that hope. The time will come, and we will find that which is we're hoping for, right? So, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I think all of this, like to kind of, I guess, summarize external locus of control, internal locus of control, I can see how hope is one of those things that can really, that is within our control and it's within our reach. And even if it's
Mhm.
as small as like, I hope that I'm going to survive and I hope that people are okay and I'm going to do things, in a sense of, with a sentiment of hope, then that can be really helpful in taking away anxiety.
Right. And I'm just going to add like a little strategy to that. As you were sharing, there is if you want to practice it, it's called the heart breathing technique. So basically it's very simple, but you just put your hand or your hands over your heart, and you just, you know, gently take a nice deep breath. And then you just invite that compassion or that love or that care or appreciation towards whatever it is that is concerning you. It might be your own needs or those of people who you like, maybe relationships, people you care about, or just the world. So this is just a heart breathing technique. There's a lot of developers behind it. I cannot take credit for that at all. And I can't even seem to pinpoint it because there's all these different people who it's kind of like the 5 4 3 2 1 technique, like we see it everywhere. So
Exactly. Yeah. Like,
mhm.
where did that exactly come from? But we know that it's mindfulness. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So go ahead.
Oh no, I was just thinking about also one of the other ways that I know that I'm currently learning about is something called like the emotional freedom technique. And that seems to be helpful for a lot of different issues, whether it's like physical manifestations of distress or just general stress or anxiety or depression or anger, things like that. And so I know that you wanted to show us a little bit about how to do that and how to maybe a small exercise or something that we can try.
Uh, well, well, I, I was going to share more about like the application, like the phone application, but I will share about
Oh,
it.
yes,
So,
yes, yes. Okay, I'm
uh,
sorry. Yeah.
no worries.
Definitely.
So what happens
I'm all,
is
she's going to show us all the things. That's her
so
tapping. That was
so
just
so basically what I was doing, I was tapping because that's what you're supposed to do with the tapping solution. So basically what happens is that they've done research. It's based on like different meridian points in the body, and basically what happens is that we focus on the things that are causing us stress, and while we're doing that, we're tapping on different body parts. They do a caution to please wash your hands, make sure that you don't like practice,
contaminate yourself
yes,
or
that
something.
word, contaminate, exactly. So they have that disclaimer on their app, but they have scripts that you can follow, and it's basically like guided scripts. So they explain to you the different tapping points. And one of the things that we wanted to share with you is that it can help reduce anxiety. So one of the things that they've done research, the developers, is that they measured the cortisol, on the saliva, and after they did tapping, it reduced their cortisol stress levels by 47% or more for participants who participated in that research. So we wanted to share that with you. We will put the information on the comments. And then also, if you are a teacher, a healthcare provider, and first responder, you will get 6 months free. That's something that they are offering, and they have specific scripts for healthcare providers who are about to go to like work and even afterwards. So they want to be mindful of like the stress or the anxiety even entering and then leaving as well.
Yeah.
So
And by
yeah.
the way, you get like no kickbacks or anything like that for sharing that resource. So it's just something that Jasmine
Oh
found
yes,
on her
thank you.
own. Yeah. Not
I'm
something that we're like promoting or something.
No, I'm not gonna get any. We're not gonna get anything out of it or codes or whatever. It's just something that we want to share because we see the good that it's done. In my own personal experience, I use it in the mornings and even go to bed. It's really been helpful and a game changer also when it comes to like managing and reducing stress. So feel free to share it also with like if you know anybody like friends or colleagues who might be teachers, first responders or work in the healthcare field, they will get those 6 months off. And we'll put the two links. Well, let's say, but I don't qualify for any of that promotion. You still have access to free scripts. So they have some that are designated just to the worry and the stress that has come from COVID-19. So one of them is really beautiful. Like it's like I'm stressed about the world, and they help you and they guide you, and it's like a programmed. It's a very structured application. So there's that. Mhm.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody has any questions either before we start to wrap everything up. I'm looking on Facebook and I see a lot of different people saying hello and I'm waving back at some people, but I don't know if you on your end on
If
your
I can see it,
control
okay.
panel, yeah, if you have anybody who's asking questions or
Okay,
anything
yes, let me
like that.
go ahead and check. Alrighty, here we are. Let me
Hi
see.
Yvette, hi Letty, hi
Oops.
Jorge, hi Matt, hi Betty, hi Paulina, hi Andrea, hi everybody. I'm just naming people that are here.
Ah,
I'm like, hello.
No, it doesn't. I'm sorry, it doesn't. It's not letting me. And then I think that if, let me just double check one more time. Okay. Oh, and then, oh no, it doesn't look like we have any questions for today so far right now. Uh-huh. From what I'm seeing. Um, but I did want to share with you also if you are uh, seeking, if after this conversation and maybe a little bit of reflection, you decide, you know what, I'd like to do my own work or be able to explore maybe some of this anxiety or uncertainty further, there's always resources. We are one of those. We are here. There's also a lot of like so I'll go ahead and share our information. If you're interested in working with Crystal or myself, you can always, and we have other providers here on the site as well. Feel free to call. Our phone number is 915-209-1234. Of course, there's also like other options as well here in the community. There's so many, and if we're not the right fit, we are far more than happy to also provide referrals also. That's something that we are always willing to do whenever, if it just doesn't happen to work out. Like for whatever reason, location or whatnot, we're happy to provide referrals as well. Mhm.
Yeah, and the website is counselingofalpaso.com. And they also there's a blog, right, where people can read about different
Yes.
topics.
Yes, we do. So we've had one on like back pain, just pain and how it connects to just the mental health portion. And when it comes to pain, there's also one on relationships and even anxiety as well. So I think I want to just kind of like make one more comment and maybe that can be helpful. I came across this and I want to share it with the community. There was this beautiful phrase that I came across, and it was by Nick Order. He's also the developer of the tapping solution, and he says something like I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to have all the solutions. I give myself permission to have peace, and I give myself permission to find the inspiration. So I wanted to share that with you because like I think it's very powerful under sometimes circumstances like this. We feel like we have to have all the answers and we have to have all the solutions, but we really, like again, like we were talking about it, sometimes we just don't, because that's a humane part of us. So I think that's something that I wanted to make sure I threw in there.
Oh, somebody's asking about the tapping technique. So
Oh,
it's called the tappingsolution.com, and I posted the link down there.
yes. Yes, and then I'll put the page after we're done, I'll put the page where you can get those 6 months free, because that's a separate one. Like it has a separate like a, what is it? Forward slash? Oh, forward slash.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So we'll go ahead and share that with you too. Are you seeing any other questions, Crystal, by chance?
No,
No?
just people saying hello and good afternoon and great
Hello.
presentation. Thank you so much for watching us and listening to us.
Yes. Thank you so much. And we are here and we appreciate you. This is from my heart to Crystal's heart. And thank you for allowing us and sharing this time and space with us as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks for partnering with me, Jasmine, to do this segment. And congratulations on becoming a fully licensed therapist.
Yay! I know. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Crystal. And thank you. I really appreciate you also sharing all of your insight and wonderful information, knowledge, and experience with me as well and the community. All
Bye.
righty, guys. You take care. Bye. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.